am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle.
Gods among us. Welcome to Prattle World. I'm your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to the first edition of Gods Among Us, as we celebrate the lives of creatives who we barely knew. And today, we're going to be celebrating the one, the only, Denny O'Neill. And I have brought another Denny to speak about him, another Dennis. He never really leaves the airwaves here. He won't stop pestering me to be on the show. I have to say yes. Just
like
have
Thrush.
to. Can't get rid of it. Just can't get rid of it.
Always.
It's just no antibiotics or treatments. Caniston duo. It's all still here. Never goes away.
Always there.
Always there. Only kidding, Dennis. So Dennis Whittle is back again, and he is, as always, charming and opinionated and full of great information, as per usual. That's basically it. Someone made a joke once, and they were like, "What do you get when you have three white guys with opinions?" A podcast, which is accurate. The first podcast I did had three of us, so that made a lot of sense. All right. Anyway, moving on. So we're going to talk about Denny O'Neill. So he was one of the guiding forces behind DC Comics and Marvel Comics for a small amount of time as well. Writer, just is a fantastic writer, great writer, and just as good an editor in comic books. The guiding force between a lot of great Batman writers. He was the Batman editor for, I think, 15 years, roughly.
15 years,
15 years of Batman. I think it culminated with the No Man's Land storyline. I think that was his big swan song.
I saw every major storyline in that era. They wrote it, edited it, or influenced it.
So I'm thinking, right, it was kind of the end of the 90s, roughly, I guess, when he ended. Was No Man's Land like 2000?
Yeah, I think so. I think it ran into 2000, didn't it?
Yeah, like 99, 98, 2000, I think, around that era. But let's just start off with your feelings about the man, Dennis, and what he's meant to you, and you're obviously a massive Batman fan, so he must have had quite an influence.
Yeah, I'm generally gutted. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm generally kind of, I would say I'm more gutted than this than when Stan Lee died. I am a DC fanboy. I do like my DC, and I read Batman when he was writing it. Obviously there were back issues that I bought, but he was just a phenomenal guy. And he not just in comic books, but everything you read about him, everything you kind of know about him, interviews you watch about him. He always fought for the little man, very much on the creator-owned stuff. He wanted creators to be finally superstars, people for hire. He worked tirelessly trying to get social justice and social rights for people. So, and it came across very much in his comics. He redefined Batman for me. I hate 1960s Batman, and it's mainly because of him and Neil Adams, mainly because they brought neo detective, dark, gritty Batman back to his roots. They were the ones with the artwork, but mainly the writing that kind of brought Batman to be a detective again, not just Pal Zap as a comedy character. He brought back the enemies to be actual kind of enemies. Two-Face, Joker. He was the guy who brought Joker back as being a homicidal maniac. He brought Two-Face back as being properly screwed, and also created brand new characters. But he's the reason why I hate 1960s Batman, and for good reason. because he
Yeah.
defined the entire generation.
Yeah, absolutely. However, he did guide Frank Miller and had a massive influence on Frank Miller. Famously, he hired him to do his first work on Batman, which was it's a great title for a story. It's called Santa Wanted, Dead or Alive. that is Frank Miller's first official work on Batman. But more importantly, like I'm a big Marvel fan, but I love Batman as it is. Like, he was the editor on Daredevil, Frank Miller's Daredevil. So he fired the previous writer and said, you know what, Frank, you write it. You're already doing the art. You write this. And I genuinely think Denny O'Neil, we all like our urban, street level, gritty superheroes. Like, Denny O'Neil pretty much invented it. Like, that's it. The stuff where it's like drug dealers and pimps and poverty and all these kind of issues that were never really addressed in comics before, never talked about, never brought to light. It was always like, okay, there's a bank robbery and the Joker's at it again. Oh, and what zany scheme he has this week? He defined that. So Daredevil, Moon Knight, he was the editor on Moon Knight as well, Doug Monk's Moon Knight. Doug Monk was a big Batman writer as well, so it kind of perfectly fit his kind of feelings. But yeah, he told Frank Miller to give Daredevil like a more realistic fighting style. So he was like, right, let's make him a ninja. Why not? Let's do it. And
he did that. He used to ground them on. He depowered, and I think what kind of helped with this kind of generation, what came through, and Denny was what those premium writers was about. He was a fan. He was one of the first generations of actually reading and enjoying comics to kind of break into writing comics. And he also run the crest with the kind of hippie revolution and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, he was
he very much wanted comics to kind of show real life, real world. And again, it comes very much in his writing. And I don't really know much of his Marvel stuff. God, you're here. And I only read his kind of Green Lantern run about 10 years ago. I knew stories. I'd read stories, but I read the whole run.
Yeah.
Only about 10 years ago. And there's other little things that kind of popped out that I was unaware that he had kind of influenced and stuff.
Yeah.
He was he kind of brought with him his grit and his kind of personality into stuff.
Yeah.
And he, not everything he did was a home run, but
No, sure. Yeah, like, he's got the the odd, everyone's got their odd, stumble here and there, but like talking about kind of, his personal life, like he was like Neil Adams recently in a tweet, he said this, he said, about Denny passing away, he said this, many comic book writers come from being comic book fans, not Denny. Denny was a news writer, often on the night beat. His eyes saw reality, and he wrote that into his work. And I think there is. I agree, there is some fandom there, but I think his approach to comic book writing does come from a level of reality and respect for the real world. And I agree. And he's talked about writing about suicides and deaths. And he sees poverty, and he sees drugs, and he sees the government, he sees corruption, sees racism, and he puts that into his work. He was a social activist. He made Green Arrow before it was like, he created woke comics. Like, he created woke comics, to use the more modern term for it. That's basically what it was. It was a form of social activism. It was a way of him, putting on the page things that concerned him. Like, he would go and help out, like Neil Adams would, at his local, the drug rehabilitation center or homeless, food drive, that sort of thing, food banks and that sort of thing.
He worked in soup kitchens, didn't he, at night and stuff
yeah.
like that?
And
go out and feed and
that's why he knows the street, and I think that was always his preference as well. Like these kind of street level heroes, like Power Man and Iron Fist. He wrote a few issues of that as well. Luke Cage has got steel skin, and Marshall, and Iron Fist can make his hand glow, but there were still very street level heroes at the time, and still are. That's just the way kind of Luke Cage has always been written. But
I also like the way that he didn't give a shit about pissing people off either. He fought very much against the establishment, even within comics as well.
Yeah, because the yeah, the comic books code, the Green Arrow, Green Lantern series that was really challenging and pushing, depending on if some stupid stuff they would edit as well, like you can't mention werewolves and things like that. Like they pulled up once because they mentioned Marv Wolfman, and his name is actually Wolfman. It's not he's not a wolfman. He's a wolfman, not a wolfman. And they were like, oh, you can't put that word in there. You can't put Wolfman in the comic. It's like, that's his name. Chill out. And there's stupid things like a puff of smoke coming out of a gun would be too big. You'd have to make it smaller. It's just silly things like that. And that came out of basically Frederick Wortham and Seduction of the Innocent, and all the lies he told. And they were lies. There was no research done. There was nothing. It's all utter bullshit he came up with. He came from, I think it's Jackson, Missouri, that Denny came from. And they had book burnings, comic book burnings. And he was there. And he tells a story about Roy Thomas, who's from the same area. Again, another massive talent, especially over in Marvel as well. Roy Thomas loves his Golden Age stuff and huge run on the Avengers. He apparently, as a kid, Roy Thomas went to these book burnings with his mom, who took him. And what he would do is he would chuck in the comics he didn't like and save the ones he did. So he pulled them out of the fire, literally. So yeah, that was.
I give Denny's kind of first writing role.
That's correct. Yeah. So Marvel were looking for assistants. Roy had, I think he'd become an assistant, and he slowly but surely was helping Stan Lee. He would script some issues, and then Denny started writing Tales of Suspense. I think it's Tales of Suspense with Doctor Strange. So he wrote a few stories with Doctor Strange. Introduced a character that would become quite one of the villains that would become quite prevalent, I believe, because Yandroth, who's the reason that the Defenders always get together, because he cursed the Hulk and Submariner and Doctor Strange to always team up even though they hate each other. So it's like some cool stuff. He helped co-create the Gladiator for Daredevil. Stan Lee partially scripted it, and then he kind of finished it off. So that kind of counts. You can kind of say he created that.
He also, he did these big superhero stories, but then quite happy to go back and do a Western comic.
Yeah,
go back and do kind of a little independent something or other, a little something he's interested in, but then come back to it.
But he wanted to be like a lot of them. A lot of the kind of comic book creators, they wanted to be novelists, like the next great American novelist. Like Stan Lee said, he wanted to be that, and Denny O'Neil. Obviously these stories he describes them as like shit lit. Comics like shit lit, and just looked down upon, just throw away trash, garbage. And the people that were working on them were kind of ashamed to be still working on these old guys like, Jack Kirby and, well, not Jack Kirby, but, there's a few other people like Gil Kane was famously like he would never call himself a comic book artist. But he would be like a graphic illustrator or something like that. But he was always ashamed. And people look like Frank. I think Frank Miller went up to him and went, "Why? You're amazing. This is great stuff." And they're like, "No, it's not really. It's not what I wanted to be doing."
That I wanted to be when I grew up.
Exactly. So it's like, well, okay. But yeah, it's just fantastic stuff. But yeah, he did start out at Marvel, then shortly went over to kind of DC, and the history tells it from there, like 70s with Neil Adams and him. But yeah, his work in Marvel was he did leave again DC to work at Marvel for a lengthy amount of time, but left because of our old friend Jim Shooter.
Really?
Yeah.
He's the most inoffensive person going. Right?
I know. Why?
Because of Jim.
Why do we hate? I mean, we talked a bit about Denny and Jim in the controversial top 5 controversial comic book moments. So, if you want to hear more about Jim Shooter, go there. That's where you need to go.
But that just proves, he's sort of person who's fighting against the establishment. Shooter's telling him, "No, I want it done this way." He's going, "No." No, I'm doing it this way. No, as out of that, I'm going.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Oh, you do it. See you later then. I'm gone.
Yeah.
But he was always like, even like I haven't seen it, but I understand that his last story is going to be in the Green Lantern anniversary.
Really?
It's the Dove Corps, which is a bunch of kind of like military people that only use non-lethal weapons to calm areas and stuff.
Okay.
Even his last written stuff is still trying to change the world, still trying to show that things can be done in a certain way. which kind of speaks volumes of him.
Yeah.
Like I'm lucky enough to have had a couple of email exchanges with him, very brief, very short.
Yeah.
Always came across very pleasant. Always came across, when he said no, it wasn't just a no; it was an explanation.
No. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Stuff. So, but no, it's for me, it's Batman. 15 years on Batman, so you can't touch Batman without touching Denny. You just can't.
No, there's no way.
There wouldn't be Tim Burton's Batman. There wouldn't be the Dark Knight trilogy. There wouldn't be the animated series.
I mean,
any of them.
Batman Begins, like just for example, take Batman Begins. Okay, so Batman Begins. Why do we fall, Bruce? That whole sequence, him falling into the Batcave, that's from a Denny O'Neil story. Crime Alley and Park Row. The alley that Batman's parents were killed in never had a location, never had a name. It was a nondescript alley. It could have been anywhere in Gotham. But he created the idea of Crime Alley, and Park Row used to be a really upmarket place. But the second the Waynes died, it went to shit because it just became like, all these old people are staying. Leslie Tompkins. I think it's Batman. I read it today. I bought it today and read it today. Batman 457. There's no hope in Crime Alley, which was
with the head with the scene.
That's right. Yeah,
it's Batman's head with the moonlight in there.
That's right. So they're dead with the silhouette of his parents in there. That was again adapted into Batman the Animated Series as well. I'm not sure if it was adapted by him himself, but I think it was. He
did the Ra's al Ghul 3.
Yes.
He wrote that, didn't he?
Yeah, he kind of rewrote that and kind of modernized it a little bit. But it's basically the same story, and it's still amazing. But yeah, so a lot of those stories. What was I saying? Yeah, so the idea, because they say in the film, like when your parents died, all hope in Gotham went. Ra's al Ghul is the villain. League of Assassins. They're the whole League of Shadows, Society of Shadows, whatever you want to call them. They're the villains in the whole film. Arkham Asylum, Denny created Arkham Asylum. Can you imagine Gotham and Batman without Arkham Asylum? There'd be no Arkham games. There'd be no Grant Morrison Arkham Asylum. There'd be nothing. It's just you can't. No Harley Quinn. Yeah, no psychologist. There's so many of these elements. He created Bane. So the other villain in the final film, who's working for Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul, both of those, the Dark Knight trilogy, and he even brought the Joker back to his homicidal ways. Like before that, he was just a joke, and he was a prankster, a jester. But like I think it's called, I can't remember the issue number, but it's Five-Way Revenge, Joker's Five-Way Revenge, I think it's called.
I do.
Oh, you know it, don't you? You know the number.
I will do. It'll come to me.
You're a proper sado like me. You're a proper sado.
It's Joe holding the card with Batman on the card.
Yeah, he's kind of nailed to it.
I've got 3 copies of it. It's and that's Tim Burton actually says that's what influenced the 1989 Batman movie.
Yeah.
And Jack Nicholson read that. That was his. That's how he became the Joker. Was reading.
Another thing. Two-Face hadn't been used in like 30 years.
Yeah, 1954, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah.
Apart from the World's Finest, where Batman dressed up as him.
Yeah, but then Denny brought him back, and then from then on, he became one of the top tier villains for Batman. Forget Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler. Like the Two-Face went to, he's at least in the top 3 Batman villains, top 4, easily in the top 4 kind of Batman villains. Venom, yeah. So if you guys want to go back and listen to my puny pod I did on Batman Venom, that's where Batman gets hooked on the steroid. Fantastic book, loved it so much so I did a whole podcast just about that one book by Denny.
Such a good book, though. 4 issues, Legend of the Dark Knight. I think
exactly right. And it's that introduces Santa Brisca, Venom, and then he would go on to co-create Bane. These are all co-creations, by the way. I don't want to, take away from the artists or anything. But we're talking about Denny. We're talking about Denny.
Yeah, the stuff was with Neil Adams. A lot of stuff he did collaborate really well, and they did lots of stuff together. Green Lantern, Green Arrow series, but I think it's funny. I read a little thing about Denny saying like it was really good working with Neil. Yeah, we had some battles.
Did always get on.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, they always get on.
They wanted the same thing, and they were from the same sort of kind of ilk, what they wanted to do and stuff. But yeah, it goes on further. Look at Arrow. there'd be no Arrow series, League of Assassins. You know, all the Arrow
all
series
that
would not exist without him.
Well, yeah, exactly. And again, like we were saying, I think we were saying earlier that Green Arrow before had an Arrow cave. He had an Arrow mobile. He had a teenage sidekick who dressed in red. You know, he was, for all intents and purposes, a rip-off character. And, you know, created in the golden age. You know, fair enough. I get it. Like, you know, credit to the I can't think of the writer creators now, but credit to them. They made a character. It worked. It was fairly successful. Fair play. But yeah, it was kind of pulling on the cape, so to speak, of Batman. But then when Neil and Denny got hold of I think he started writing Green Arrow in Justice League and said, we've got to shake some stuff up. So they made him lose all his money. So he can't have these high-tech gadgets anymore. He can't have a high-tech, you know, he doesn't have any money. He's not this billionaire. They're trying to differentiate him as much from Batman as possible. And they made him like a social crusader, a social justice warrior, all the way back when we didn't even know that phrase or use that phrase or shamed that phrase, you know.
And don't you think, I flicked through issues this week of that, and it resonates so much now, today, right now.
Yeah,
with everything that's
absolutely.
Going on today. People in power, not giving a crap about the little man, and, you know, Green Lantern with all these powers and all this kind of, all this stuff that he's doing, and then you've got who's fighting for the little man, and just some of the dialogue. I know it's been going on Facebook a lot. You know, the conversation.
Yeah, I posted it. So it was famously for those who don't know, there's a very famous panel. Do you want to describe it, Dennis?
No, you go. You posted it, man.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the hard traveling heroes Green Arrow, Green Lantern series features Hal Jordan as a kind of conservative, a kind of Republican type, and then Green Arrow is very much the liberal kind of, you know, Democrat sort of type. And they're discussing the kind of the amount of power that Green Lantern has, the imagination, things he could do, things he could accomplish. Green Arrow's going, right, well, you've been off flying around, you've been protecting your sector, but right here at home, we've got some really hard-hitting issues, some real problems. And this kind of old, kind of disheveled, kind of black man comes up to him and goes, you know, I see you help the blue skins, the purple skins, the orange skins, but what have you ever done for the black skins? And ashamedly, like Green Arrow, Hal Jordan, just he can't even look at him and just says, I can't. Yeah, just so ashamed and so upset that all the things he could have been doing and the way he could have been helping his own world, his own planet, his own city. But he's been, you know, he's got bosses above him from another planet, Guardians of the Universe, and then after that, that's the first issue, and after that, they decide they take a Guardian who's weirdly up for this journey, just like, yeah, let's find America, come on. Like, I mean, it's not like a protect millions of planets in this universe, but yeah, just go find America. It's Appa Ali Apsa, I think, one of the first few Guardians that actually name themselves, give themselves like a personality. I think he did go mad years later and started like killing people. Don't we all? That's what happens when you see all the troubles throughout America. You just go, you go mental. You're like, this is too much. Let's kill everyone. He just couldn't hack it. His big blue brain couldn't hack it. And they travel the world, and like Denny has a kind of habit of depowering characters, like you were saying. Like he depowered Superman. He got rid of the kryptonite. I think it's kryptonite nevermore, I think is the story. But that was to, in a way, that was to, because he was like, he's too invincible, he's too powerful. So they got rid of kryptonite, and they were like, "Oh, now he's going to be too powerful." But no, it was a subtle way of him depowering Superman to a level where it was believable that he could have other injuries, that he could have, you know, different weaknesses and things like that.
His suit would rip and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So he looked disheveled.
He said, I remember watching an interview with him. He was saying about Superman. He goes, "Yeah, he literally blew out a star." He went, "Done." He goes, "What were you supposed to do with him?" So,
how do I create peril for this character?
What I like about the Green Arrow, Green Lantern kind of stuff is it bounces between them. So you start off with like Green Lantern going, you know what, I do need to look at all this, blah blah blah, a little bit, and then it turns around to the fact that, you know, Green Arrow, you're far too self-involved with this stuff. look what's happened to you, Ward. Look
Yeah.
and he's like, crap, I've been so involved in all this, I've forgotten the people closest.
Yeah. So
and that was like a big story arc as well. So,
like I think he says something like, you seem to have the answers to everything, Green Arrow. What about this? What's your answer for this? And it's kind of like, oh, there you go.
Ward is a junkie.
Yeah.
I think it does have on cover, isn't it? Oh, Batman 251 Joker cover, purple.
Yes, yeah. I think that's right. As far as I know, you know better than me.
I don't. I can't remember my wife's birthday or my daughter's age, but I can remember Batman 251. So
well, when these creators die, like I know obviously I've got relatives that have passed away and things like that, and I'm equally gutted when family members die, but I mean, not you, Dennis. No, couldn't give a shit. But like I. But I think I do feel like Stan Lee. I was genuinely gutted for like a good week. I was still, and I feel kind of the same way, or a similar kind of reverence for all that he did.
This one, I don't know whether it's just because of the shit year everyone's having and stuff, but it was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
It's one of the good ones, and we throw around the word legend a lot these days in comics, movies, or whatever. But he touched so much. He created so many characters. He created lore. He created so much stuff. He's a lot, and there's not many left. I was thinking you got probably Steranko, Adams, Thomas.
Yeah.
There's not many left. Really.
Not any of the kind of originators, I'd say, from the defining era. Yeah.
And all this kind of the kind of liberal ideas of how things should be written and change, Stranko with the Shield stuff, the Nick Fury thing. So, and you just think, I wouldn't be reading comics like I do. It wasn't for Denny. I know I said a broad set, but it's true because I read Marvel for a bit, but it was Batman that got me collecting comics.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a kind of a '90s kid. So one of the first books I went to, or a lot of the books like I went to, Denny was involved in. For example, controversially, Death in the Family. He came up with the idea that the fans would vote whether Robin lived or died, and then they decided to kill him. It's a very small margin, but it still happened. Killing Joke. He edited that, didn't he? Yeah, he edited that. So Alan Moore's Killing Joke. He decided to make it a high value graphic novel because of the subject matter and some of the things that are in that book. He didn't want that for children to be sold to children directly, so he made it a higher price point so that it may put people off buying it. Only the
glossy and embossed letters.
Exactly, yeah. So only the fans, the adult fans that had that kind of money to spend on a comic
that you were used to in comics and stuff.
Absolutely, and Nightfall as well. Nightfall, especially for me.
He wrote the novel, didn't he? He novelized it.
Yeah, I didn't read the novel, but I tell you what I did. I had the BBC audio drama, which is by Dirk Maggs, very famous. He did a Spider-Man one and some Superman ones as well. But that's the peak for me. That's the pinnacle. It's fantastic. If you've got 5 hours of your life, go and listen to that. It's amazing.
I've got it on CD. I've got that one and Doomsday.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
On disc, and they did Nightfall and The Quest, didn't they, as well?
That's right, yeah, all of it, and he wrote some of the stories. So, because he was still an editor, but every so often he'd pull out a story. Like I think he did the storyline where Alfred and Bruce go off on their own adventure during Nightfall. I think it's called Quarry. Yeah, or something. Yeah, during the search. That's right. Yeah. But yeah, I'd like to talk about his work on Iron Man as well, very very briefly.
Because I don't know much about it.
You don't know Iron Man. I am Iron Man.
I'm like I said, I'm not a massive Marvel.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I like bits.
Yeah, let's go.
That's why you're here.
This is why I'm the other side.
For that, yeah.
I'm the other side.
Podcast or anything. You're just here to talk about Iron Man.
Yeah, fuck. You invited me. I'm the scarred version of our two-faced coin. You're the other side of that coin.
Yeah, it depends what day it is.
Or vice versa. Or vice versa.
What time in the morning it is.
Yeah. So his run on Iron Man. So it's kind of mid to kind of late 80s. They were coming off the kind of David Michelinie, Bob Layton run, which was very famous for introduced a lot of characters and elements, the alcoholism especially. So what kind of got resolved pretty quickly. Basically, there's a storyline, and his armor's malfunctioning. I think it's called Power of the Iron Man or Demon in a Bottle. The storyline, whichever title you want to take, and all the way through, his armor's malfunctioning. He's like, something's happening. The villains, but it turns out a villain has been malfunctioning, making it malfunction. He goes through all these tests, and he tries not use the armor. He gets trained by Captain America on how to fight, because who knows better in the Marvel universe? And at the end, he realizes. And all the way through this, he's casually drinking, quite casually, all day, every day. People are making comments on his behavior. His butler leaves him because he's being rude and dismissive and, behaves in a disgusting manner. And right at the end of the book, he realizes that the problems with his armor could have been as easily caused by his alcoholism. And then he goes into rehab. His girlfriend, Bethany Cabe, helps him kind of recover. And that's kind of it. And eventually, and he gets casually mentioned throughout, like, "Oh, I best be careful because I don't want to go back on the drink," or he'll look at the bottle and things like that. But it was never really properly addressed during the rest of that run. So Denny himself suffered from alcoholism, and he used that as a kind of touchstone to write the character. He felt that was resolved too quickly and too easily. So he made Tony Stark going on a massive bender. He created Obadiah Stane, who's the big villain in the main Iron Man movie, the first Iron Man movie, and he basically destroys. He's a rival company. He destroys his business, tears it down. It basically becomes Iron Man's Lex Luthor, effectively. And this is quite a long run he had. So I think it's from like 160 to 208 of Iron Man. So it's a big long run. And there's a great kind of famous cover where it's like Iron Man's in a blizzard, Tony Stark's in a blizzard, and there's a big wall, and it says, "Tonight, Tony Stark will either be sober or he will be dead." And it's a really good story. And there's a great one where Tony's down and out in a kind of a abandoned kind of flop house, or one of these kind of places. He's just like a proper like drunk den sort of thing, and Captain America comes in and there's a fire and he has to save him, and he's like, my dad was an alcoholic and it was horrible, and I don't want this to happen to you, Tony. I think you can only be helped when you're ready to be helped, and when you want to be helped, I'll be there. And during this period, while he was going through this, Denny decided to kind of introduce a kind of bit of much needed diversity at the time, and he had James Rhodes, Colonel James Rhodes, take over as Iron Man. Like he's not technically proficient. He doesn't know how this thing works. But there's a guy attacking Stark Enterprises. Tony's too drunk, can't do it. So Rhodey puts on the armor and shows so much bravery. But he's this kind of just everyday guy. He's been in the army and stuff, but it's this everyday guy, doesn't know how this works, but he has to do it. He's the only one. And I really like the run because it's kind of, it brings a kind of, because obviously Tony Stark is very intelligent, very, like over the top, flamboyant playboy. And to have James Rhodes come in and just being like your average guy in a high-tech armor that could kill anybody, if it turns one way and does the wrong thing or the wrong gesture, blow someone's head off. I thought it was really interesting, and eventually Tony comes back and he starts recovering, and they start kind of fighting again. And Obadiah Stane is a big kind of presence in all these stories, and eventually the climax of this story is Iron Man 200, where he basically injures and/or kills a lot of Tony's friends. So he says, "Right, I can't wear my old armor. I can't," because he created like a kind of a rehab armor kind of thing. It was like this grey, like the original grey armor, because he wouldn't wear the gold and red, anymore, because it just brought back too many memories of him like throwing up in the helmet and things like that. So he was like, right, I'm going to make a new one, and it's one of my favorite Iron Man armors. It's the Silver Centurion armor. It's got the massive red backpack, massive proper 80s shoulder pads going on. I loved it, and then he battles Obadiah Stane as the Ironmonger, as he was known, and again shows up in the Iron Man movie. So those two massive elements of those movies, it's a Denny O'Neil thing again. And you're right. Without these elements, we wouldn't have these movies or these characters or these amazing stories that get retold again and again and again, because Denny was such a fantastic talent.
Like you say, he's not afraid to, like you say, go back and touch on. Like he does write about addiction quite a lot. Including like Batman with Venom. Like so with the heroin stuff with Speedy. So he's not afraid to kind of hit those things that people go, oh, hang on a minute, I kind of relate to that. I know it's like, being addicted, needing these things to make myself feel better. Like you said, he a bit of alcoholic himself, so he does. It's hard hitting, but entertaining. He entertains. Yeah. He's great, And talking of introducing John Stewart.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
Am I right? It's the first black character DC's, was it? Not the first.
No. I think we talked about him. Yeah, I think it was the first Black Green Lantern. One of their big kind of main kind of black superheroes at the time. Again, with his story, he kind of, I think Hal Jordan's training him to be a replacement. So he doesn't actually technically become a Green Lantern. That's not until Len Wein's run, I think, much later. But they do introduce him, but it was very much that issue was very much a sign of the times and what was kind of happening in kind of 70s, America with race relations and stuff. It was not a good time, and exactly. It comes right back to it. And he's very much depicted as that kind of he's outspoken, outright, and angry at the way the world is, and I don't blame Jon Stewart for being that way. Absolutely not, given what that time in America's history and much like now. But it's definitely one of the, I think it's one of the stronger books. There's a few of them in the Green Lantern, Green Arrow, which they're good, but I think they can be a little heavy-handed with messages and what they're trying to say. However, I think you've said it before that we didn't have that before, so I think he did need to be heavy-handed with it to get that message across to adults and the children who are reading it. Now we're a lot more kind of subtle about it, but it's basically they're still the same thing. We're still making there's still social kind of awareness and issues and, gender equality, race equality. All these kind of issues will always crop up in comic books because that's what they are. Stan Lee, brought attention to that. Denny O'Neil brought attention to that, and we should always talk about these things. At least start a dialogue at the very least, because he never went, this is how you solve racism. He would just offer up the issue, and he would offer up the questions, but he wouldn't offer the answers, because we'd like to think there's an answer, a real answer to these issues, and maybe one day we'll figure it out. But right now, and circa 1970, there was definitely not those answers. But
I think with the answers now.
No, exactly. But
that's another podcast.
That's another podcast entirely. I try and like I've got a friend who always wants me to do issue-based podcast, and I'm very reluctant to do issue-based stuff. But I like talking about issues in relation to art and to creative products. So I'll always talk about these kind of issues within the podcast, but I don't want it just to specifically be about these things, because I'm not as well versed in the politics or the minutiae of these issues, and I don't want to appear like I know all these things and have all the answers, because I don't. But you know what I do like, and know what I do know? I know comics. So
well, I think we do need to talk about one thing. Wonder Woman 178.
Oh yeah.
Now he's credited with he didn't do was it 4 issues, 5 issues he did?
I think he didn't do the whole run. He definitely didn't do the whole run.
He edited, didn't he? And
yeah,
basically they depowered Wonder Woman and turned her into like a spy.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Emma Peel type, wasn't it? Kind of like event, like the original, the '60s English Avengers, those Avengers. And
I think everyone kind of goes on and bitches about him doing this, and you've depowered feminism and this and the other. And I watched him watched quite a few things on YouTube and stuff recently about him, and he basically says, "Yeah, I got it wrong."
Yeah, fair enough.
Openly, I got it wrong. The idea behind it was to make her more approachable, make her more kind of relatable, that everyone can look at her and say, oh, we could probably do that. We can learn martial arts. We can do this and the other. But what he did do was take away who Wonder Woman was.
Yeah.
And he openly held his hand up and said, yeah, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
But again, that's the merit of a man. You know, Joe Shuster would never say I've done something wrong.
No. People are still asking him to say that he did something wrong. He'll never admit it.
Avengers what?
Oh yeah.
I was at a family barbecue.
I wasn't even there. I was in a Pizza Express. I was never there. Yeah. I don't sweat either.
No. But he also kind of he dipped his toe in other like smaller characters. Like for me, I've got Beware the Creeper. Number 1.
Yes, yeah, he did.
You know,
with the legend Steve Ditko.
Yeah, so he kind of dipped his toe in that, and he did that. You know, a bit of Hawk and Dove. He did a little bit of that, and
he wrote. He wrote a bit of Spider-Man as well.
He did right. He came up with Madam Web. Yeah,
that's right, Madam Web and Hydro Man.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, Hydro Man. He did Justice League. He wrote a couple of issues of Justice League as well. And each issue he did with Justice League, he put a new character in there and messed with the teams. Again, messing with the status quo, making us look at things differently and stuff. He also brought in the Superman. What's he? Zar-El, is it? Kal-El's Earth 2 Superman.
Oh, right. Yes. So the one with the grey temples.
Yeah. So he kind of created that as well. So he did bounce out, but he also challenged the unknown.
Yeah.
Lots. We all think of him being this big kind of character who did the big titles. But he literally he did pretty much every character that we read, see, listen to.
Come to think about, yeah.
Every little thing he dipped his toe in and added a little. You know, the Flash. I think it's World's Finest 199, 200 and 201. The Flash and Superman race, or it might be 198. Yeah, 198.
Yeah, he wrote one of those, didn't he?
Yeah. So he, you know, even the smaller titles, he had a little run in, and you know, had a little play about it and stuff. So, as much as he's this big character and this big social justice character, which he didn't like to be called a social justice warrior at all. No. Even though he kind of against the bomb, he went on marches, he went on civil rights marches, he did all that sort of stuff.
Interestingly, did you know while he was in the Navy, he was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, he was there. He was literally there. But again, like, I think I read an interview somewhere where he was like, oh, yeah, I was campaigning about not being nuked. How brave was I? You know, ultimate destruction. I was campaigning against that. Look at me, how radical. But yeah, you know, so to be honest, if I was at the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know, when that was happening, I think I'd probably be against nuclear weapons as well.
Yeah. And for me, one of my lower tier characters, which people class him as like, is Shazam. And the first time DC published Shazam, which was actually their property, I believe it was Denny O'Neil who was involved in it. I don't know. I think he wrote it and edited issue 2 and 3.
Maybe, yeah.
I think he wrote the first issue. It was the first, because before then, even though they didn't own the character, they licensed it from who owned Shazam? Come on, tell me who owned Shazam.
Was it CC Beck? Was it or? You mean the company, or
the publishing company? Yeah,
I can't remember.
They sued them, didn't they, for
400,000. Sued them to death.
Yeah, and then they didn't get the rights for the character which they wanted, so they kind of leased the character, they kind of licensed the character, and then eventually bought the character. And the first time he was released as a DC character, it was Denny O'Neil who did it. So, did you know he also gave. For the Transformers fanboys out there, he also named Optimus Prime and Megatron.
Yeah, but I believe it's Megatron as well. Yeah. I don't know if he named a lot of the others, but I think those are the two main ones.
Is that argumenty thing, isn't there?
Yeah, there's Jim Shooter's involved. Yeah, Bob Budiansky. Bob Budiansky was writing it, and then
said he came up with Optimus Prime for ages and ages and ages. And he went, no, actually, I did it, and the people have collaborated now. But typical shoot story. God, he's such an ass. Anyway.
Yeah, pretty much.
Shadow number 1 was one of his as well.
Yeah. I've got one of his books. I think it's The Shadow, Hitler's Astrologer. I think that was for Marvel originally, but he has a real kind of fanboy like for that character, I think.
And one of my favorite characters at the moment. Question:
Oh,
His first solo outing was Denny O'Neil as well.
now I've seen the first 4. They're out of print now, but the first 4 graphics, I've found them on eBay. I'm currently bidding on them, and I'm hoping I can win. I've put in a nice sum of money because they're out, because it's it's quite cheap. Like the cheapest I've seen a lot of them is like 40 quid each, and this is around kind of 40 pounds for all 4. And I was like, I'm gonna get that now. I'm gonna buy that.
The thing is with the question now, he's popping up in lots of things. He's got his own little miniseries at the moment with Black Label DC.
Yeah.
So but it was Denny O'Neil came his first solo series. Before then, he was a bit part player. But again, he gave him his little quirks and things and made him who he was. Which is basically he's a better detective than Batman.
Well, I mean, Hub City was always, he described it as being more corrupt than Gotham ever could be. I think it's all about, I think it's, if I'm right, that series is more about him going after government officials and less about kind of street crime and drug dealers and arms dealers. And
the question also was a hat better than Batman as well.
Yeah, pulls it off.
Yeah, he does.
I just wanted to kind of go through some of the things he's created, like characters specifically. We've talked about some of the elements of Batman. The Lazarus Pits, that was him as well. Like he created the Lazarus Pits, which again, a big element of Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul. You can pronounce it both ways. You can Google that.
How do you say it?
You can either say Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul. Apparently,
I think I say Ra's al Ghul.
Denny used to say Raish, so I used to go with Raish. But sometimes I'll just forget and I'll use one or the other.
I like to go against the establishment, so I'm going to go Raish.
Well, you do it.
Raz, I'm gonna go
like the first time I saw Batman the Animated Series, that's how they said it. They said Raish.
Bob al Ghul.
Bob al Ghul. You know what he also created, which I didn't think he'd had. I've been doing some deep digging here. Yeah. He created the Matches Malone identity that Batman uses.
Really?
Yeah. He was the first guy to come up with that. So the idea that he pretends to be this dead former criminal, and he always has this disguise, and that he's basically used that disguise forever now. But that was his invention as well. Also, the White Martians, so the kind of rival race to the Green Martians, that was the pop up kind of in Justice League and pops up in Martian Manhunter.
I just want to tell the listeners that I am nodding.
He's nodding along. He knows.
I'm nodding.
He's not got a shocked face. Like he's like, oh, I didn't know that.
No, I'm nodding, and I realise that no one can see me apart from
Good nod. That's a good nod you're giving me. Okay, I'll list very quickly some of the kind of the big names that he created, apart from the ones we've already mentioned. So we mentioned Bane, Leslie Tompkins, Talia al Ghul, League of Shadows, Ra's al Ghul. He created Maxie Zeus, Lady Shiva.
Yep, excellent character.
We've mentioned Jon Stewart, Obadiah Stane, Richard Dragon.
The karate person.
Yeah, the karate man. Azrael,
who may be appearing in the season 2 of Batwoman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. I know he was in Gotham, sort of, kind of.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I didn't see it.
Yeah. I really like. I like John Ball Valley and I like Azrael, and they're both really good characters.
We said Hydra Man. Did you know he created Lady Deathstrike from X-Men? Yeah. So again, in a movie, huge part to play within the Wolverine. She was introduced in Daredevil, but moved over to kind of X-Men and Wolverine comics later on. Calypso, who's kind of like the girlfriend for Kraven, and she's a voodoo priestess who, if you read Spider-Man Torment, which I might do a podcast about because it's one of my favorites by Todd McFarlane, she's like the main villain in that. Bronze Tiger from the Suicide Squad, very famous. Madam Web we mentioned. And technically, now there's a lot of kind of reboots and reshuffles and crises in DC Comics. So technically, he created the second Black Canary, so Dinah Laurel Lance.
Yeah,
technically.
Yeah, he wrote the issue when they died as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So when the first issue, she's Black Canary 2, as we call her. Yeah. The first appearance that's classed as the first appearance is when the original. I'm doing all these quotes that no one can see. These quote marks. The original Yeah, nodding, quite marks. All audio. This all audio. She basically comes over from Earth 2 to be in the Justice League because her husband died, and they're like, "Oh, we don't think you're going to be. You can take Wonder Woman's place." And then she gives out her canary cry, so a big sonic scream she has. That wasn't an element to the character until then as well. So that's a brand new element he brought in, which has become very famous, in Arrow and various other depictions of that character. So technically he created her. There's a lot of kind of timey-wimey continuity retcons I can't be asked going through it all, but technically he created that version of the character.
It was a Justice League comic, wasn't it? It was in Justice League.
Yeah, it's a famous cover with you can see her in the dark, and there's fishnets, and I think the rest of the men are on the floor. I think I can picture it. I just can't remember the issue number. But it's she can see the fishnets on the left hand side, and it's something. I think she's saying something like "I've defeated the Justice League" or something like that. But that was him, and he directly influenced a lot of the talent, the big name talent that we have today. So people like James DeMatteis, who I love, Greg Rucka, Ty Templeton, David Michelinie, Tom King, Jim Lee, Scott Snyder, Brad Meltzer, Kevin Smith, Dan Slott, Mike Mignola, Joe Quesada, Mark Miller, Greg Capullo, C.B. Cebulski, and the list goes on. That's top tier comic book talent as well. It's not just middle of the road guys.
The first kind of he gave like I said, Frank Miller, his kind of first work, and gave him Batman Year One as well, which
Dark Knight Returns.
Movies,
Like we didn't mention that he must have been involved in that. Again, he gives the opportunities. He's a guiding force with all these creators, and and he was open to new ideas. Solving narrative problems, or he would go, right, this is an issue, not a comic book issue, but like a story issue, and he'd be like, we need to solve this problem or fix it or approach in a new way or do something. But again, it was always from the human angle, the human problem, and the human expression, and the difficulties that we have. He didn't like particularly writing these big universe, space adventures. He would write them if need be, but that's not his preference. He's a common man who speaks for the common man, speaks for the common good in all people. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, race, creed, color. He was there for you. And he used to he was one of the directors on the Hero Initiative charity group. He was one of the directors, and he dealt mostly with distribution of kind of the charitable goods to the right groups and areas. He also taught. He taught at the. Let's see, where was he? He taught a course on writing for comics at Manhattan School of Visual Arts, and he would share duties with John Ostrander, who famously wrote the Suicide Squad, created the Suicide Squad as we know them today. But yeah, he's just a wonderful guy. We wouldn't have anything to do with Batman, and Batman would not be as popular, or anything to do with Batman would not be anywhere near as popular. He created the Dark Knight for me. He created the Dark Knight.
That's where we started. I think he had, apart from Bill Finger, there's nobody else had that much influence on Batman than him.
I couldn't agree more. No, I couldn't agree more, Dennis. You're absolutely spot on. Couldn't agree with you more. I think
you can't watch the Arrowverse without having a touch of it.
Yeah,
you can't watch any DC movie without having a touch of it. You can't, like you said, the Iron Man stuff I didn't know about went through the Iron Man movies.
Yeah,
and he was just a nice guy. He pushed against establishment. He wasn't a yes man. He sometimes misstepped a little bit, but always held his hand up and said it's a mistake. And you don't get people like that around much anymore. And
no.
It's a shame. And like I said before, there's not many of these ilk of people, for me anyway, of the comics that I read, around so much anymore. Legends, people saying like Jim Lee a legend. Yeah, okay. All these.
You've got to appreciate, for me, like Jim, like when I'm growing up and when I'm reading stuff, I'm sure I read Denny O'Neil stuff and that, but like Jim Lee's X-Men for me was like, wow, that is it. So I think it's purely like a generational thing.
Of course it is.
And
I read a lot of Denny O'Neil stuff, Like I was reading it when I was 13,
Mm.
so 92, 91, 90s.
Yeah.
So I was reading kind of like the Titan reprints and going to comic fairs, buying these books, which were really cheap at the time, which is real expensive now, and it cemented kind of what I wanted in my Batman. I don't want camp, and I hate. I keep on about. I hated that 60s. I know people look back with fondness to Burt Ward and it is what it is.
It was quite indicative of the kind of the comics at the time. Like it wasn't far off. So it was quite, in a way, quite a successful translation of the comics at that time.
That. Very, very fresh face. But for me, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' Batman is my Batman.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Long ears, nice flowing cape, jumping around the place, being a detective.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah. The world's greatest detective.
And constantly questioning himself as well. Questions morality. Using Alfred as not just somebody who brings his cape. He was the person who bounced ideas off, having him as a proper character. And for me, that's Denny O'Neil for me.
I'll tell you another important thing he did for Marvel as well. Him and Neil Adams. So it was Roy Thomas and Neil Adams were working on the X-Men title just prior to it being cancelled, because they were like, we've got to shake things up with the X-Men title before it gets cancelled. So they did, and it was a very successful that run. Just as it was picking up, they were like, only afterwards did they notice that the sales had spiked. Like, they had to cancel it shortly after, before they noticed. So it was like, oh, well, it's gone. So then they just started doing reprints. But one of the last things they did, Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, and Roy Thomas all together, decided to bring back Professor X, who had been dead for like 30 issues. Like this is his first death, by the way. Not there's been many since. Lots and lots. So he basically faked his own death to stop an alien invasion. He had to train himself to stop an alien invasion or something. But can you imagine the X-Men without Professor X? Like even the original X-Men, like they didn't have Professor X for a very long time after he died. So even Chris Claremont's run, John Byrne's run, wouldn't be what it would have been without Professor X as a character, and within that, and like we wouldn't have even had that kind of, we wouldn't have introduced that kind of Martin Luther King, Charles Xavier's Martin Luther King, and Magneto is Malcolm X, that we wouldn't have that kind of parallel, that discussion. Who knows what it would have been like? Would we have even got half the kind of X-Men stuff or stories? Chris Claremont, there's no doubt in my mind Chris Claremont was not, influenced somewhat by Denny O'Neil. The way he approached stuff and the social kind of justice angle, the social activism, like Chris Claremont tried to introduce trans characters and gay characters, and all the way through his run, all these kind of different kind of representation that was sorely needed at the time. They could only really hint at or discuss, which is not something that was even discussed or talked about. So again, just changing things, changing stuff up, and making comics better, more accessible for everybody.
We are missing though the biggest change that he made, and I think that the biggest far-reaching influence that he did was getting rid of Nightwing's disco suit. For the Nightwing miniseries issue 2.
Disco Wing.
Yeah, he got he was like, gotta go.
Yeah.
He's gonna make him more streamlined. He's looking after Blue Haven. Come on, let's go to his disco suit.
I mean, surely it must have been. Surely disco had passed when they created that suit. Surely.
I love that suit.
Because they did get rid of some of the elements to it, like the high collar and some other stuff in there. They did change up a little bit.
Season 2, issue 1 of it, you still got the yellow on it.
Yeah.
And then issue 2, it's gone to the blue, like the bird.
Yeah, almost like a V shape.
Yeah, and that's kind of stayed.
Yeah, that kind of hasn't gone.
No,
like we were talking,
changed colour slightly, but it's still the same thing. So it still looks like a bit of a bird, bit of a V on his chest.
Yeah, well,
that's him as well.
Yeah, like I was saying about the Silver Centurion armor, that which turned up in Iron Man 3 as well. Like, it's quite an iconic look. You know, it changes it up a bit, but it still kind of maintains the original feel of the
You
red
can
and gold.
you can stick his changing of bringing back Xavier. You can forget about the Lazarus Pit. You can forget about all that stuff. Nightwing disco suit. Come on.
Got rid of that. That's the massive.
Would that have been, would his disco suit been able to carry a solo series? I think not.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh dear, oh dear. I feel like can we say any more? Can we have we exhausted what we've mentioned, like everything he's ever done effectively?
Yeah, this is from a really kind of selfish point of view. If you want to read there's loads of reprints and there's omnibuses out there which just showcase Denny O'Neil stuff.
Yeah.
What will happen now is, as always happens, and I've already picked up this morning, all his comics have doubled in price.
Yeah.
You want to collect the comics, give it a few weeks, and they'll come back down to normal price. What you'd expect to pay for this sort of ilk. But there's I know that you can go on eBay and pick Venom, Titans Venom, Titans reprint that you can pick up for a couple of quid. Couple of the omnibuses, and the whole Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff. You can pick up on eBay, it's still in print. You get it from Amazon. There's loads of really good stuff.
There's a lot of digital available digital as well. Yeah. I've got a few. I've got a list here of a few good ones. If you don't mind me going through them.
No, you go, and I'll say yes or no.
Batman Tales of the Demon collects the early Ra's al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul stories. Birth of the Demon, where he writes the origin of a Ra's al Ghul. Which it was drawn by what's his name? He died not so long ago as well. I can't remember his name. No worries. He's very good. He's one of my favorite Batman artists. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Batman Venom we've mentioned. Again, check out my podcast on that. It's an amazing book. Just so good. Batman Shaman. Have you read that?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I would really. I haven't read it for years, but I do remember really liking it. Green Lantern, Green Arrow we've mentioned. Azrael, Fallen Angels. That's the collection it's got the original miniseries, and then it's got him after Nightfall, kind of.
So Sword of Israel and Thingy of the Bat.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Agent of the Bat, or whatever it's called. You just talked about Nightwing, talked about Question. The Iron Man collections he's written. Iron Man: The Enemy Within, Iron Man: Jewel of Iron, and Iron Man: Ironmonger. When he was also editing Daredevil, Frank Miller had a break, and in between, Denny wrote some issues, so maybe like 10 issues or something, like nice little run. And it's collected as well. It's called Daredevil Loves Labour's Lost. Now, a lot of his work as well with Neil Adams that you want to read, and Batman-related Neil Adams stuff. There's two different types of books. They're either Batman by Neil Adams books 1 to 3, or Batman Illustrated by Neil Adams volumes 1 to 3. So it's basically the same book each time. Just one of them's a more recent printing of it. I mentioned Shadow Hitler's Astrologer. I mentioned that. I think I kind of half forgot about this one, but Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Yes, very much so.
Quite a famous book, that quite a big deal. There's a lot of
Neil Adams drew that as well.
Massive splash
and people in the background.
Yeah, loads of famous faces in the kind of splash cover, wraparound cover it was. And we mentioned Superman Kryptonite Nevermore, so depowering of Superman. So on the editing side, we've mentioned a lot of his stuff, but I just want to mention a few more. So couple that he was the editor on as well were Larry Hammer's G.I. Joe, which is quite a popular Marvel book about the toys, and that went on for many years. Very long run that. I bought it all, hurt my bank account, but I did buy it all. And John Byrne's Alpha Flight, which our friend Keith Williams inked some of those issues, and that's a great run. I love the John Byrne work, so he's obviously had somewhat of an influence on that. But yeah, I think, is there anything you'd like to mention that I've not mentioned?
Batman Punisher.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Because it's very different, because they did 2 books, and the one that Denny O'Neil does is Azrael.
Lake of Fire, I think it is.
Lake of Fire, yes.
Yeah. And then there's...
It's good because it's a crossover, so it's,
yeah.
It's in it. And they're very similar in their styles as well. Azrael in that with the Punisher as well. So yeah, I'd like read that. It's good.
Yeah, I've definitely read that. I think I preferred the other one, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I just like the fact that the two characters are very similar.
Yeah, they're like, let's burn and kill everyone. Go.
Yes. Yeah. And I also like the artworks, and I think I like prefer the artwork in that one too. I can't remember it, but
cool. Well, I think we've come to the end of our hard traveling. We've been two hard traveling heroes, and I think we have. I hope we've done a somewhat of a service to Denny and his legacy. If there is a legend of the Dark Knight, it is definitely Denny. I think. All the other work as well. Like we said, there wouldn't be an Arrowverse without Denny. Without you wouldn't like. Another thing he did. He started the romance between Green Arrow and Black Canary.
Yeah, putting them together. Yeah.
Which again has just stayed with those two characters. Just stayed together for the most part, or they've always been linked. Like two sides of the same coin. He's done so much for comics, so much for civil rights and social activism, and you name it, and brought these issues to the forefront when nobody was thinking about them, when kids weren't even thinking about them. It's just incredible talent, and I'm genuinely gutted that he went.
I think that. He realised comics were for everybody, not just for kids.
Much like yourself, Dennis.
Yeah, not just aiming comics at kids, aiming comics at everybody, making them accessible to everybody.
I don't know if I mentioned this, but I think it's almost like kind of kismet or fate. But he was born the same year Batman was created. The exact same year. There's something in the universe that made that happen. And yeah, go out, read those books. Enjoy all your Batman related material. Like no matter if he wrote it or if he didn't, there's elements that he created. Arkham Asylum, Crime Alley, Bane, Venom. Even the prison Bane grew up in, which is Pina Duro, I think it is. All these Lazarus Pits, Ra's al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul, all this stuff. I mean, they're even thinking about making a Madam Web movie. We wouldn't be getting this Madam Web movie without Denny's help. It is what it is, and
no matter what you read or what you watch, he's had some influence on it, I would think.
Yeah, if be it Spider-Man the animated series that featured Hydra Man and Madam Web, you name it. Like he has had a hand, especially Batman, especially Green Arrow, and Green Lantern to some respect, and other characters question. But he is a hero in his own right. Absolutely, he's been a hero to me and a hero to many creators, many fans over the years. And yeah, so every time they mention Arkham Asylum, every time you're playing that game, you're watching an animated movie, Denny has contributed in a huge way on some level to the characterization of Batman. Because you've got to think as well back then is that they didn't really talk about the characters, or they didn't really have characters. It was just like, here's a problem, Batman will solve it, yay. This is they created these characters in a way, like they gave them personalities, they gave them problems, issues.
Batman, like I said before, you are kind of detective living in the shadows. The characters, like I said, Alfred and the kind of other people behind. Did you do the Gordon series as well?
Yes, Gotham of Gordon, or Gordon of Gotham, I think it is. There's a collection for that as well. I think it's Batman Gordon something. But check that out.
He looks at not just the main character, but because you read books before, kind of in the 50s and 60s, and it is very much just like you were saying. Batman shows up and so on, everything's great,
solved, problem solved.
Alfred was bringing him his cape and a cup of tea at the end of the day, and his pipe. Batman used to smoke a pipe.
Like a lot of people, when they look at these characters, only see the superhuman traits and the powers and stuff like that. Or wouldn't it be cool to have that power? And I'm like, no. Have you not read a comic? They've all got fucking horrible problems. Iron Man's an alcoholic. Batman is just a mess. All these characters. Green Arrow's got his own problems. His own issues to deal with. Green Lantern. you name it. He put the human element into these characters. He imbued them with a life, not unlike a father, I guess, in some ways. He is a father of modern comics. He put the man in Iron Man. He put the man in Batman. Before it was just the concept and the powers and all that sort of stuff. He is he's our signal, our gloomy in the gloomy night of Gotham. He's our bat signal, lighting the way for all the creatives and fans to follow. And
never going to be replaced.
Never, ever, ever.
No, because nobody in modern day comics will ever have the influence he's had across the board.
Absolutely.
Even the smallest thing like Lazarus Pit, people thought that would appear in animated series, it would appear on the TV shows of Arrow and things. Something as simple as Lazarus Pit, but he came up with that.
It's iconic. All of this stuff we've talked about, all the things we've mentioned, is truly, truly iconic. And he's touched people around the world. He's touched these characters, and they in turn have touched people. And he will be sorely, sorely missed. But I think that's it for today. I think again, I hope people go out and just appreciate these characters just a little bit more because of this one man.
I agree. Go and read some stuff.
Excellent. Okay, so before we go, we've got to do the where you find us on the social medias. I don't care. Denny's gone.
Find me on all the social medias.
All of the social medias. So where to find me? You can find me at Facebook at Secret Balls. At Twitter, it's at Dan Secret Balls. Instagram is Spider Dan Secret Balls. And the podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and many, many more. If you'd like to donate towards the podcast, you can buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/SpiderDan and the Secret Wars. And if you interact with us, don't forget to use the hashtag Prepare for Prattle. I've been Dan.
I've been Dan.
Good night, everybody, and let's keep that bat signal shining all the more brightly. Keep the bat signal light on tonight for Denny. Good night, everybody.
See you later. Bye-bye.